Hi, everyone. Hi, Shima. Thanks for saying hello in the chat. Everyone else is, of course, welcome to use the chat today to say hello, also for Q&A. So today we've got a session here on the SR&ED program, and this is a program that a lot of tech startups and beyond will use as a great resource. So we want to make sure you as startups are aware of the program and the details of the program so you can understand how best to both prepare for utilizing it and also get an understanding of what qualifies, what doesn't qualify, etc. So we have a great team of speakers from EY here to support you on that. I'm just here to give a few introductory slides and then we'll jump into it. And I don't know if did I say hello? My name's Angie. Myself and Justine are here from New Ventures BC. I see lots of familiar names here, so welcome back. And if you're new, we do pretty regular seminars, webinars for early stage tech startups. We're kind of approaching the end of the series for this spring, summer. However, everything exists on YouTube and our website. So you're welcome to go back and check back into things. So first, before we get started, I would like to first acknowledge that the offices of New Ventures are in Vancouver, which puts us situated on the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. We are, of course, privileged to work and play on these lands, and of course, also we get to show off our lands this year as well, or right now as well, with a lot of people here for the World Cup. So it's been particularly beautiful time of year here. Also like to just acknowledge our sponsors for the competition quickly. So our presenting title sponsor is Innovate BC. Our gold sponsors are, of course, EY, who you'll be hearing from later, well, momentarily, I should say, Fasken, and also M2M Tech. Silver sponsors, Front Funder, RBCX, SFU Beauty School, Vantech Angel Network, and then we have a wonderful collection of partners of bronze media sponsors. These are all great organizations focused on supporting tech startups, anywhere from angel investors to CEO roundtables to events. So definitely check all these great organizations out. Um, Also, just want to flag quickly that we do have a few other events coming up for the summer. What's coming up here? Next week, we do a monthly series with the Angel Network, Vantech Angel Network, which is really the chance to talk to an angel investor. They're open office hours. Aaron from Vantech will usually give an overview for the theme of the month. So the theme this coming month is what investors are looking for, and then you have an open forum to ask them questions. We've had some really good turnouts and discussions from that, from what Aaron's told me. We do have a financials workshop coming up July 6th as well. That will be a webinar. That is with Peter Dorsman from the Angel Forum, and that is around the type of financials um, investors, advisors, anyone that wants to work with you would be wanting to see as your company grows. So a little bit more detail on that front. And finally, if you happen to be a golfer or you just are good at pretending to be one, that's me, we do have our annual small golf tournament. Very casual, pretty fun. It's a mix of startups, sponsors, advisors. It's about 32 people. I think we have maybe 2 spots left. So if you're thinking of golfing, please do join us and sign up soon because I think we're just about full. Okay, that's it. So like I said, we are talking SR&ED today. We have 3 speakers who will take you through a presentation from EY, Ingrid, Gian, and Maddie. I will let them introduce themselves. I believe we also have Rod from EY as well, who will be supporting during the question and answer period. So thank you again to the EY team for both supporting the competition. I think it's year 26. So that's pretty long-term support that we're grateful for. And they've probably done a version of this SR&ED presentation for 26 years as well. So lots of expertise. So with that, I believe Ingrid is going to get things started. So Ingrid, I will pass things over to you.
Thanks, Angie. And I will just quickly share my screen here so everyone can see. Already.
Looks good. I can see it.
Great. And I guess I'll start with the introduction. So my name's Ingrid. I'm a senior on the EY Vancouver SR&ED team. I have a background in nutritional science and also computer information technology. And I have been working in SR&ED for 4 years. In my day-to-day work, I primarily support software and IT clients with preparing and defending their SR&ED claims. And I'll pass it on to the rest of the team for a brief introduction. I don't know if Gian or Maddie.
Yeah, I can take on. Yeah,
Awesome.
hi everyone. Nice to see you. My name is Gian. I also work at the UI Vancouver office. So I'm a CPA by background. So I work on the number side of the SR&ED claim, and work both with the IT and science part. So I'll hand it over to Maddie and then Rod.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Maddie. I'm a senior consultant also sitting in Vancouver with the EY team. Coming up to 2 years with the team here. I started originally in New Zealand with the helping with claims for the R&D program in New Zealand. Over here, I'm on the science side of things. I have a background in biological sciences and have helped many different types of clients on the science side of things, such as pharmaceuticals, mining, forestry, with their SR&ED claims. Now I'll hand over to Rod.
Thanks, Maddie. I'll be fairly quick. My name is Rod. I am also with EY in Vancouver with the rest of the team. I am a director on our team. I've been with the firm for about 25 years, and I'm going to be pretty quiet today and let the three stars of the show run things. But I'll be here if anybody has any questions later.
Thanks, Rod. And then we'll go into the agenda. So here's what we will cover today and what you can expect to take away from the session. To begin, we'll provide an overview of the SR&ED program, followed by a discussion on technical and cost eligibility. After that, we'll share practical SR&ED examples to illustrate how the program applies in real-world scenarios, and then walk through EY's approach of how we can support you with your SR&ED claim. Lastly, we'll leave time at the end of the session to address any questions you may have. And Yui, here we are. So what is SR&ED? So SR&ED stands for Scientific Research and Experimental Development. It is the long-standing Canadian tax incentive program designed to encourage businesses to conduct research and development in Canada. The program has been in place since the 1980s and represents the largest source of non-competitive R&D funding in the country. The SR&ED program is administered by the CRA, and claim must meet both technical and expenditure or cost eligibility, which we will cover later in the presentation. The primary benefit of SR&ED is the investment tax credits, which allows businesses to recover a significant portion of eligible R&D costs through federal and provincial tax incentives in the form of tax credits or cash refunds. Federal SR&ED incentives are broadly available to entities carrying on businesses in Canada. So that includes individuals, partnerships, trusts, and both Canadian and foreign control corporations. For example, if you're a Canadian controlled private corporation, or what we call the CCPC in British Columbia, you can recover up to 41.5% of your eligible R&D expenditures through combined federal and provincial SR&ED credits. Currently, over 19,000 claimants receive more than $4.4 billion annually in SR&ED investment tax credits. SR&ED is a very unique program that carries many benefits, but to be eligible, a business must generally be carrying an operation in Canada and performing SR&ED work that is related to its business activities. So for example, if you're a robotic companies, you will be expected to conduct SR&ED in areas that aligns with your core operations rather than unrelated fields such as pharmaceutical drug development. In addition, the business must incur eligible SR&ED expenditures, which Jian will cover in more detail later in the presentation. And I also want to highlight 3 common questions we frequently receive regarding SR&ED eligibilities before passing on to Maddie to explain the technical eligibilities in details. So a common question we receive is whether SR&ED is a grant, as it can appear very similar at a high level. However, there are some fundamental differences. So unlike traditional grants, SR&ED is non-competitive program. This means multiple companies can claim SR&ED for similar types of technology development, as long as each claimant meets the eligibility criteria based on their own work. So in other words, businesses are not competing for a fixed pool of funding. If you are eligible, then you're entitled to the benefit. However, SR&ED is an annual filing requirement. Claims must be prepared and submitted as part of the company's corporate tax returns, which can be administratively intensive. This is also where structured support can help ensure that claims are prepared efficiently and aligned with CRA expectations. Another common question we receive is when can SR&ED be claimed? So SR&ED claims are retroactive, meaning they're filed after the end of a company's fiscal year. In general, the filing deadline is the later of 6 months after fiscal year end or 12 months after the corporation tax return filing deadlines. In practice, this gives companies up to 18 months after their fiscal year end to submit a SR&ED claim. This also means claims can be filed together with the tax return or later as an amendment. So for example, if your company incur eligible R&D expenditure in fiscal year 2025, there still may be opportunity to include those costs in a SR&ED claim, provided that you're within the filing deadline. Additionally, you might ask, what if the development or research project failed? Actually, this is a process-driven program, so project success is not a requirement for eligibility. Instead, SR&ED focuses on process of experimentation and whether the work generated new technological knowledge. Failed attempts are not viewed negatively. In fact, they often demonstrate that technological uncertainty existed and it was systematically investigated. A simple way I like to think about this is the story of Edison and the light bulb. So when asked how he felt to fail 99 times, he responded that he had actually found 99 ways that did not work. So from a SR&ED perspective, those 99 attempts represents knowledge gained through experimentation, which is exactly what the program is designed to support. Now I'll pass on to Maddie to talk about how technical eligibility is determined.
Thanks, Ingrid. Yeah, so with that overview of the program, I'll now walk us through the technical side of SR&ED eligibility. So from a technical perspective of the SR&ED program, the CRA is focused on 2 core questions: how the work was carried out and why the work was performed. The how focuses on the technical approach taken throughout the project, while the why is focused on the intended technological advancement or knowledge gained through the work. These 2 concepts are the foundation of SR&ED eligibility. And on the next slide, I'll break down what each of them typically looks like in practice. So how do we define the how and the why? The slide is, it's a bit complicated. It has a lot of text on it, but breaking it down, if we start on the left side here, the how focuses on how was the work performed throughout the project. The CRA is generally looking for a structured and systematic approach, meaning the work involved activities such as developing a hypothesis, testing that hypothesis through experimentation, analyzing results and data, and documenting the work that was undertaken. So, for example, how you may be running trials or experiments in a lab or during production, and you might be experimenting with changing conditions such as temperature. That would be the how. Moving to the right side of this slide, the why focuses on the technological advancement generated through carrying out that experimental work. The project begins with a knowledge baseline, including publicly available information or your own specific knowledge of this project. But through execution of the SR&ED project, the objective is to gain incremental new knowledge. So as an example, if you're undertaking tests in a lab, the results of your trial would result in new knowledge. Whether that supported your hypothesis or didn't is not important to the CRA. It's just that you learn something new. What is important is that you learn something new that you didn't know before. So in order to identify a SR&ED project, we want to follow this flow chart here. So first you encounter a technical limitation. You're not certain exactly what you need to do to arrive at your desired outcome, even after researching in the public domain. If not in the public domain, you might experiment with how to get to the final desired outcome. For example, say you wanted to develop a new flavor of potato chip, but you weren't certain how to achieve that. If this new flavor could be achieved through already existing knowledge that either you had or was already available in the public domain, then no experimentation is required. And so the work is determined as standard development activities instead of SR&ED. However, if you weren't certain what combination of materials or ingredients were required to achieve this new flavor, but you may have an idea of how you might achieve it, but you're not entirely certain. So you need to undertake some trials and testing in order to understand if your hypothesis is correct. So you proceed to undertake experimentation, analyze results, and you will generally make iterations and retest until you achieved your desired result. The objective of the investigation is to generate technological advancement, meaning an advancement in understanding of the underlying technology, process, or capability. Any advancements achieved can then ultimately support or improve the commercial product or process. Technological uncertainty and the achieved technological advancement represent the why behind the project, which you can see in the green arrows on this slide. The systematic investigation represents the how. So some common indicators that may suggest there is a project might be SR&ED eligible is if includes if you're trying to develop a new product, improve or develop a process, design improvements, or if you're seeing situations when you're running into cost overruns, that's a clue that there might be SR&ED eligible activities happening there. Additional indicators may also include activities or project characteristics, such as involving a technical team or third-party payments. So if you're getting a contractor in to help you and they're having to undertake research on your behalf, then that can also be eligible for SR&ED. So in the next slide, some of the documentation requirements that the CRA is looking for. You need to be able to support that you are doing SR&ED to the CRA. So they'll expect documents to be created and maintained at the time the work is being performed rather than afterwards. The documentation itself can take many different forms here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it just depends on the nature of the project. So could include project planning documents, designing experiments, memos, emails, generating reports. Those are all good supporting documents for the SR&ED program. So now I will pass on to Gian, who will walk you through what eligible costs are associated with the SR&ED program.
Thanks, Medi. I will start with what are eligible cost categories. We can see there are 5 big buckets of cost types when it comes to SR&ED claim: labor, materials, capital, contract payments and third-party payments, and overhead. I will discuss each category in the following slides. The labor costs are salaries and wages paid to employees who are directly engaged to shred activities. We often see people in the position of project lead, engineers, technicians, scientists, etc. There are a few interesting points for labor costs that I would like to mention. CRA allows to claim 100% when the employee spends more than 90% of their time performing eligible tasks. Under SR&ED, there are two types of employees, specified and non-specified employees. When someone owns more than 10% of the company, this person is considered as a specified employee. Simply speaking, non-specified employees are the regular employees. The reason for this is that any bonuses paid to specified employees are not eligible labor costs under SR&ED. Lastly, any commissions paid are not eligible under SR&ED. I think now the question is, who should I include to SR&ED claim? I think it's easier when you think about what is the eligible tasks are. I have a list of common eligible tasks on the right side here. I won't read each line today, but want to mention that eligible tasks are not limited to this list and can be determined case by case. The second eligible cost category is materials. You may purchase items such as parts, raw materials, or chemicals for your shred activities. When it's consumed or transformed during execution of shred, it can be claimed as materials. One important thing to note here is that when material became a part of final product and sold later, the material expenses claimed can be subject to recapture. For materials, the best way to make your claim easier is to keep track of materials used to shred activities. If you're working on the claim for the year end after or on December 16, 2025, capital expenditures such as new testing equipment or software license fees are now eligible for SR&ED. I want to note that not all capital expenditures will be eligible for SR&ED. There are rules to qualify, which I won't go into much of detail today. For capital expenditures, the intent is the key. The capital is purchased to be used in SR&ED all or substantially all. The next slide. The next item is contracts and third-party payments. This is the payment you made to contractors or third party to conduct SR&ED activities on your behalf. CRA allows you to claim 80% of actual cost incurred for this category. To qualify as contract or third-party payments, they must be Canadian and the work is performed in Canada. CRA will apply a look-through rule to ensure this. Further, the contract work should be claimed in the year the work was performed rather than when it was paid. Lastly, since the contractor is performing SR&ED on behalf of your company, the intellectual property should remain with the company. The last eligible cost is overhead. Under SR&ED, the definition of overhead is other costs that are directly related and incremental to SR&ED. There are two allowable methods to capture overhead expenditures for SR&ED: traditional method and proxy method. Let's talk about proxy method first. You can think this method as a simplified method. Under proxy, the overhead will be calculated as 55% of SR&ED wages claimed. Since it is calculated based on labor cost, it will be the most beneficial method for those with significant salaries and wages as part of their SR&ED claim. On the other hand, the traditional method requires identification of individual overhead expenditures that are incremental and directly attributable to the shred work performed. Generally speaking, this is more beneficial for large industrial companies. The company is allowed to make an election annually. However, the same method should be applied throughout all projects in the same year. EY's goal as a shred consultant is to assist our client to select the most beneficial method while considering both total investment tax credit and the audit risk perspective. Lastly, I want to quickly touch on some not eligible costs. Common items we see are patent legal fees, foreign labor contractors, and conference fees. Now I will hand it over back to Mary to give you some shred examples.
Yeah, thanks, Gian. So now myself and then Ingrid, we will dive into some project examples or where we see shred. So starting on the applied sciences side, I think when most people think of R&D, they think of people in white coats in a lab. So I have a few examples here of where shred can exist elsewhere in other sectors. So the first one here, agriculture. Some examples would be experimenting with crop breeding to develop things such as pest resistance or changes in size, color, or another example would be livestock breeding to develop higher lean mass in cattle or sheep. Also experimenting with different harvesting processes to understand how to more effectively harvest crops could be another one that we've seen in that area. In manufacturing, some examples might be experimenting with changes to the manufacturing process, such as increases to temperature, pressure, changes in the product size and scale, experimenting with new technology on the line. Those all could be eligible for shred. Or another example within manufacturing is experimenting with different materials. So if you were developing sports equipment or clothing, you might experiment with what different materials can be included in those products and can they withstand the metrics that you're wanting to achieve. The last example I've got here is food science. So like my example earlier with developing a new flavor, you may be wanting to trial how to maintain certain properties such as texture while developing a different flavor or changing one property but maintaining other properties at the same time, such as stability or texture. Understanding the complex interactions between different chemicals in food and how you can overcome these in order to achieve desirable properties. These are just 3 examples in 3 different sectors, but again, shred exists beyond this, including in the energy sector, mining, forestry, construction, or IT projects, which Ingrid will now talk about. I think you're on mute, Ingrid.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, and then like Maddie mentioned, IT examples comes in very different shapes and colors. So I got 3 big categories here that we see quite often with our clients. So that includes hardware and device development, software development, or creating, developing new digital solutions, and then integrating different systems or optimizing your infrastructure. I'll list out the most common one, which is software development. So these could be web applications, data systems, automation tools, or what we see quite a lot these days, like AI and machine learning related projects. A common question we get is how do we distinguish between, routine development and shred? So I will walk you through like a very simple example. Suppose you're building a web application and need to retrieve large volumes of data from your backend, but the performance is too slow. So in other words, it's taking too long to maybe load the website. And then you do your due diligence and you try to apply standard solutions. So those could be database indexing, caching, or any known, optimization techniques. And if they resolve the issue right there and then, that will be considered as routine development. However, SR&ED begins when those standard approaches do not work, and you're required to conduct further, systematic investigations to resolve the problem. So this may be involving experimenting with new data models, testing alternative architectures, or developing novel techniques to improve performance and scalabilities. So from SR&ED perspective, the work will start when the uncertainty is identified and experimentation begins. It will end when a solution is achieved or when you determine that, the approaches you tried or tested do not work. If that problem continues into future periods and like additional experimentation is required, then that work may be treated as a continuation of SR&ED in subsequent years. Therefore, you can keep claiming them in the following years. And then lastly, I will touch on EY's 4-step processes in how we support SR&ED claims. So at EY, we have experience working with both large organizations and startups, and we will tailor our approach based on your familiarity with SR&ED and the level of support required. But in general, the process begins with the initial meeting to introduce the program, very similar to today, and to understand your business and identify relevant R&D projects. So that's step 1. And we will then connect with your technical and financial contacts to gather the information required to prepare the SR&ED claims. So from a technical perspective, this may involve, technical interviews or a review of written documentations, followed by target follow-up questions to understand how and why behind the work performed. So once we gather these informations, our team will prepare the technical narratives and costing analysis related to the SR&ED expenditures. These draft materials will be shared with you for review, after which we'll work with your tax accountants to finalize the SR&ED schedules for submission with your corporate tax return. So we'll do most of the heavy lifting here. And yeah, I guess that concludes our presentations. Thank you everyone for joining, especially on a Monday. We really appreciate your time, and we're happy to take any questions or discuss anything in more details if you have questions.
There are some questions in the chat. And then Sandeep, I'll ask a few in the chat, and then Sandeep will have you put up your hand. First, around external contractor, I guess 2-part, do they have to be based in Canada? And kind of another part was from Victor, by Canadian, do they need to be like a citizenship? Is it a PR, work permit? What qualifies as a Canadian worker?
So to answer that, yes, the contractor must be Canadian. So when you claim under SR&ED, you need to enter their business number. So it has to be registered Canadian business. For employees, they don't need to be PR or citizen of Canada, but the baseline is that they need to work in Canada, and in order to work in Canada legally, they must have some sort of work permit, I assume. So yeah.
Okay, I'll ask one more, then I'll give it to you, Sandeep. Just questions about, can materials include cloud compute expenses, ChatGPT subscription, that kind of thing?
So those are falling under software license fee, which is considered as capital expenditures. And we didn't go into much of detail because it just brought back by CRA. And there's a very specific rule about that your intention of using that, for example, ChatGPT subscription, you're using it for SR&ED. So it is somewhat tough to proved to CRA that you are only using ChatGPT only for SR&ED activities. So there is a bit of a part that you need to grind down to see if actually qualifies or not.
Okay, Sandeep, you can go
Yeah.
ahead.
So my question is, since these are tax credits, let's say, I start a firm this year and, I engage in research activity, but I don't launch a product and generate revenue for another 2 years or 3 years. then would SR&ED be helpful to me in some way at all in recouping some of these expenses? Because I think 18-month window is what you mentioned. And is it like, yeah, so can I offset revenues in the future, like 3 years in the future?
Yes, so you can still claim, and I believe that you can go back 3 years in your tax return to apply whenever you have profits. Yeah,
I see.
but I believe the cutoff is 3 years. Yeah.
Oh, the cutoff is 3. Okay, okay.
And maybe, Gian, I can just expand on that a little bit. So there's a few things in your question. So they are tax credits, but they, depending on the nature of your company, they are either refundable or non-refundable. So refundable tax credits means you get cash regardless of whether you owe tax or not. Non-refundable means exactly that. You don't get the cash, but they offset taxes that you would otherwise owe. So if you are a Canadian controlled private corporation, which probably most people on this call would be, then they are refundable cash back. So whether you're taxable or not taxable, you would get cash back. And so within certain size limitations, but generally speaking, yes, you would get cash back. If you fall into that non-refundable piece, what Gian said is correct. You can carry the tax credits back 3 years, or you can also carry them forward for up to 20 if they're not non-refundable. Yeah.
I see. Is there any criteria which separates the refundable versus non-refundable?
Yes. So you have to be a Canadian controlled private corporation. So that's fairly self-defined, right? That's the primary thing. And then there's certain size limitations as well, like taxable capital tests and things like that. But they're fairly large, and they've been expanded in the last federal budget as well in new legislation. But the biggest one is you have to be a Canadian controlled private corporation. Obviously, the policy intent there is that the federal government is trying to target cash to the smaller Canadian startup companies. And then as you get bigger, or you become a public company, or you're not Canadian controlled anymore, then it becomes non-refundable.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay. There's lots of questions. We're just beginning. One I'm seeing a lot of variations of is, are founders or shareholders eligible as, I guess, salary costs if they're getting paid?
Yes, so you have T4 issues to you. You will be considered as a specified employees, so your salary can be included. What you cannot include is your bonus. I also saw somebody asking if I get paid as contractor. I believe you can, but again, the contractor payment, CRA limits it to 80% of it. So if you get paid 100K for it, only 80K will be qualified as qualified expenditures. Yeah.
Okay, some eligible expenses questions. Do travel expenses for meeting with an R&D collaborator, are those eligible?
Sure. Can you
Sorry,
repeat the question?
That was travel expenses?
Travel expenses related to meeting with a R&D.
Yeah, so I'll field that one. Yes and no. So they are. So let me step back. So there's, as was mentioned in the presentation, there's two ways of claiming overhead. Travel would be considered an overhead expenditure, basically. And there's two methods of claiming, one being the proxy method and the other being the traditional method. So under the proxy method, it's just an overhead allocation where 55% of your SR&ED salaries and wages, you take 55% of that, it gets lopped on top, and you get the tax credit on that as well as an overhead allocation. So if you're using the proxy method, then no, the travel expenses wouldn't qualify because the proxy is already covering that. If you're in a traditional method where you're actually itemizing your overhead expenses, then yes, the travel would be considered an eligible expenditure as long as it's directly related and incremental to you performing SR&ED. So it would have to meet that directly related. So it's directly related to the SR&ED. You couldn't do the SR&ED without it. And it's incremental, meaning you would not have incurred that expenditure otherwise.
Okay.
So it depends on which methodology you use.
Okay, that's good info. Another one around qualification. So patent legal services do not qualify, but with the salary of in-house legal counsel engaged in the R&D process, would that qualify? At least the portion of their involvement in the R&D.
I think it's based on what type of tasks they perform. So it was more on administrative work. I believe it might be considered as overhead. And again, what Rod said earlier, if you're using the proxy method, it will be covered under 55%. So it varies, depends on the situation and what they actually performed.
Okay. Let's see. Are funds paid to fund a MyTax grant eligible? So like the 50% the company pays for.
My tax is yes, you can the amount you paid for the my tax for the people who perform the shred work, yes.
Okay. What else is here? Is the $3 million limit on applicable funds for the highest level of credit inclusive of CAPEX, or now that CAPEX is included, has the limit of funds requested increased? Hopefully you understand that because I do not. It's Isabel's question.
I think the first thing I can mention is that the $3 million limit, I assume that you're mentioning the expenditure limit that has been increased to $6 million, I believe. If you're hearing this after or on December 16th, 2025. The CapEx, I believe it's capital expenditure, so I think it has a different rule, but I will hand it over to Rod for better answers for that one.
Yes. So if the capital qualifies for shred, it would fall within that limit. Yes. And the limit, as Gian said, is now $6 million. So it's been doubled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. If I'm the director and main shareholder, is it true that I can only claim at most 65% of my wage, even though my R&D work is higher?
I believe that 65%, maybe it's, I think you're talking about the proxy calculation. So when you claim your salary, your 100% of a salary goes in as a labor cost. But when we calculate the proxy method, that 55%, in the calculation, any specified employees' wages is kept at 75%. So there is a bit of formula that it needs to go through, but simply speaking, for the proxy calculation, yes, 75%.
Okay, and then I guess there is a question about, building a deep tech startup, need to hire a US consultant because it's highly technical, they're the most qualified. Is there any acceptability for Shred to include that type of contract or material expenses?
Unfortunately, if the US the consultants are based in US, you cannot include for shred claim. If your shred work is performed in Canada and you have material expenses, that material is purchased in outside of Canada, but the work was performed in Canada, that can be included.
Okay. I think I've got most of these here. If your question has not been addressed, why don't you put up your hand? And we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
What about an EEG cup, like a device, to scan the brain waves that is used only for R&D? Would that like an eligible capital expenditure, even though again it's not like consumed or destroyed, right? So it's not a material.
So if I don't know what EEG, uh, if that's a capital expenditure and you purchase and solely used for shred purposes, then yes, I see that being eligible for capital expenditure.
And I've seen another one that I was also curious. What about the hardware expenses? Say I buy like a server, to like run my experiments, so like computing power, but instead of paying a license, I actually buy my own server. And then I partly use that also for commercial purposes, like how much what's the percentage that I have to use that only for R&D, in order to qualify?
I think it was it 75%, Rod? I probably need your help on this
Yeah,
with the
no.
capital.
So I
Yeah.
think for servers and things like that would still be capital. So the capital rules, they were around back in 2014, and then they went away and now they're back. But basically, there's two potential tests. One is what Gian mentioned previously, where there's the intent test, and the intent test to me is essentially when you acquired it, when you bought it, was your intention to use it all or substantially all in shred, meaning 90% or more in shred. If so, then yes, it would qualify as capital. If the answer to that is no, there's still a provision to where you could claim up to 50% of it, but it gets a little convoluted. But so without going into the details of it, generally speaking, if you're going to use it, up to 50% in shred, there are provisions to claim a portion of the cost, not the whole thing, but a portion.
Okay, Jessica has been waiting patiently. I think it's my text question. You're muted, I think, Jessica. Oh, did we lose her? Okay. Oh, you're still muted, Jessica.
Goodness gracious. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, everyone at EY for today's presentation. Thank you, Angie, for your wonderful delegation skills. I do have a My Tax project underway currently with SFU. So I was just curious at to what point do I start the step one, scope and analyze? Should I start the conversation now, or should I wait until the results of the study have been analyzed and published? I was just curious as to the timeline of a My Tax project.
I think I saw your comment in here. So when you say start the conversation, do you mean start looking at claiming shred?
I just don't know at what point. Like you just the president says My Tax, yes, it's eligible. So I'm just like my Tax project is 6 months to a year long with SFU. So I'm just wondering, do I wait? Do I start the conversation now that we've started the project, or do I wait until the study with SFU is finished and the results have come in and published, and then start the conversation with you? I'm just wondering at what point during a My Tax project should you start talking to somebody like you?
I see what you mean. So you don't need to wait until you've got results or there's a published study. If you're already undertaking the research, if you're already like doing experiments or testing, like within that fiscal year, you can already start the conversation now. And also in that way, you can also get advice on how to best document what is being undertaken in order to have good evidence to the CRA when it comes to submitting the application.
Ah, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Also, just to add on one thing from the costing side. So again, this is considered as a TPP, like third-party payment. So you need to claim in the year that work was performed, not when it's like paid. So you need to think about when the work was performed.
Oh, okay. Okay, when it was performed. Thank you.
All right. This is a quick one. Are tickets to events and conferences eligible if they're used to meet potential R&D partners?
Unfortunately, I think any tickets, events, conference fees are just exception.
Is the proxy method typically the more common choice from applicants versus traditional? What does that do to the claimable base?
So again, it is your choice, and you want to see what is more beneficial in terms of ITC. So any company who does, like for example, IT startup, there might not be a lot of overhead. So in that case, when lots of labor, then 55% of labor might be much more beneficial than your actual overhead cost. So you want to see what it look like on your own company and find the better method. And generally speaking, a lot of startups, smaller companies, proxy seems to be more beneficial.
Okay, one just came in. Should we file our corporate tax returns in shred at the same time, or can they be done separately?
It can be done separately, but we do suggest to claim with your current year T2. But it can be done as an amendment, as Ingrid mentioned earlier.
Is there a limit on how many employees can work on one shred project? Does eligibility depend on?
I don't think there's a limit on how many employees can work on. Yeah.
No, the eligibility is purely assigned. Well, whether a project qualifies or not is purely a scientific determination. And then however many employees worked on it, that's who worked on it.
Okay. Prashant, I think most of your other questions are answered in the discussion earlier.
Yes.
But so we will share the recording.
Thank you.
And then two questions. These are okay. These are simple ones for UEY. So one is, can you share the point of contact to start the process of submission? And then as related, I think Mike was asking what, and I know the answer will probably be it depends, but what's the general costing model for having EY assist with an application?
I think Rod will be the best person to answer the question.
Sorry, can you read that again? I just caught about half of it.
Oh yeah, just what's the cost of having EY assist? Is it
the cost?
percentage of or what's the
I mean,
model?
that depends. We can work, I'm not going to give out specific dollars on this call, but we can give, we can work in any number of ways. We can, usually if it's a company that hasn't claimed SR&ED before, they prefer to do a contingency based, which basically means we take a percentage of the tax credits. So that way, if you don't get anything from CRA, then we don't get paid. So that's one way we can work. The other way is we can work by the hour, where you pay us by the hour, but then of course it's not success based. And similarly, we could work on a project basis or somewhere like a flat fee, but again, that's not success based. In our experience, most companies, especially newer ones, would much rather do a contingency basis where you only pay us when you get tax credits from CRA. So that's the general fee structures.
Okay. I'm not sure how the audience is feeling, but I guess Farshad wants just a bit more clarity on the difference between proxy and traditional methods. I think we went into it a little bit.
Sure. Jen, do you want to handle that? Or
Sure. So proxy is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the personal tax, but when you also claim moving expenses and personal tax, like you can use simplified methods. So you don't have to keep any receipts or you will have those records, but it is not required when you claim under proxy, because they will simply check your labor amount and then times 55% and consider that is covering your overhead. Whereas traditional method, you will have each individual receipts or record of what is directly related and incremental to SR&ED. So you will have your office. If you have any lab facilities that you have electricity that's incurred, there's some support work that was incurred. You will have record of this, and you will individually sum those up and claim what's actually incurred. That's more on traditional side. And if anything you want to add, Rod? Hope that answers you for a shot. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna just give a last call for any burning questions. Lots of questions today.
I think I can also answer the one from Andrea.
Oh,
so
okay.
you're asking 70% of my work on SR&ED. I'm using proxy method for the overhead. Am I getting 70 plus 35? So for example, your salary is 100K and you worked on 70% of your time for SR&ED. You are claiming 70% of your salary, which is $70,000. And that will be the expenditure of the calculation, the base calculation of a SR&ED. And then, sorry, what's a 35%? I'm not 100% sure about 35%.
That would be approximately 55%.
Oh, 55%, yes. So
say 38, yeah.
Like kept at the 75 and then it becomes grind down to 35, I assume. That's what you meant?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So
yeah,
70K plus this
yeah, so
38K.
70K is your salary base, and then the 35,000 will be your proxy base salary. So it will be $105,000. That's the base of the calculation of ITC. So now that amount will be used to calculate your federal ITC, which is either 35% or 15% based on your company, whether it's CCPC or you have expenditure limit. And then there will be, if you're BC based, it will be 10%. So does it make sense?
Okay. So there is another percentage then
Yes,
that's
to get
okay,
to
now
the
it makes
investment
sense.
tax credit. Yeah. So what you calculate there is the pool, expenditure pool that they can use to calculate the investment tax credit.
Okay, thank you so much. Now it makes
No
sense.
worries.
Thank
Yeah, yeah.
And then one last one. If IRAP is helping pay for salary, would that still qualify for SR&ED?
So the answer is so yes. So if you paid your employee 100K, again, I'm just simplifying the number, and IRA is supporting that employees, like half of their employees' salaries, the amount you pay will be deducted by the amount you receive by IRA. So simply speaking, that you will think as the actual amount out of your pocket will be the eligible cost.
Okay, that seems clear. And if anyone wants to follow up with any questions or their own SR&ED claims, is there contact info for?
I think the last slide might have the information.
Okay.
Yeah, I just put it up. Yeah.
Okay, great. So there it is. And we will send out these slides as well. So if you have any questions or want to get in touch, there you go. Otherwise, I think that wraps things up. Is there any final words from the EY team? All
Thank
good.
you everyone for joining.
Yeah, they've said it all. Thanks for all the great questions, everyone. We will share the recording and the slides later this week. And if you have any questions or you really want to follow up on anything in particular, feel free to get in touch with myself or Justine, and we will make that connection for you. Otherwise, thanks once again to the team at EY for all the detailed info and for all answering all the questions. And we'll see you all again soon. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.